What would compel a three-legged dog, scarred by past trauma, to leap into a raging, black river, defying every instinct for survival? On this terrifying night, with a life hanging by the thinnest of threads, a single creature on that bridge understood a truth no human could see. A truth that would rewrite what rescue truly means, proving that sometimes the greatest courage comes with a limp, and the ending isn't at all what you'd expect. Her name was Willow, a fixture in the small river town of Oakhaven. Not just any dog, but the three-legged dog. Everyone knew her story: a reckless driver, a crumpled puppy, left for dead on the asphalt. She moved with a permanent off-kilter gait, a living testament to a past tragedy. Willow wasn't built for speed or grace, or, certainly, for navigating the treacherous currents of the Oakhaven River. She was slow, scarred, a creature whose very existence was a quiet triumph of endurance. Oakhaven itself was a town defined by its river. Usually, a gentle companion, it whispered through sleepy summer days and offered up its bounty to patient fishermen. But for 3 days now, that whisper had escalated into a hungry roar. The rain had been unrelenting, a ceaseless drumbeat against roofs and windows, turning fields into lakes and roads into treacherous channels. Houses that usually stood well back from the bank now felt the encroaching damp. Panic hadn't quite set in, but a deep unease had. The town watched, collectively holding its breath as the river began to swallow familiar landmarks. This wasn't the river they knew. This was a force demanding respect, threatening to break ancient promises. By the third night, the river's transformation was complete. It wasn't just high, it was a furious, churning monster. The access road leading out of Oakhaven, usually a modest ribbon of asphalt, had completely vanished. Fences, once proud property markers, were mere skeletal remains poking from the brown, frothing expanse. The low fields, usually dotted with grazing cattle, were now indistinguishable from the river itself. Then, through the gloom and the relentless downpour, a faint red glint caught the attention of the growing crowd on the main bridge. Far out in the middle of all that churning water, a small red car sat trapped. It was clinging precariously to what appeared to be the last patch of raised ground, its roof barely showing above the surging tide. Someone was inside. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. The Oakhaven Volunteer Fire Department had arrived, their emergency lights painting strobing reds and blues across the rain-slicked bridge. But even with their ropes and their grim determination, the scene before them offered no easy answers. The current was too fast, too violent. Debris, whole trees, sections of fences, even small sheds, surged past, making any attempt at a boat launch suicidal. Firefighters stood helpless, their hands clenching useless ropes, their faces grim. Despair began to settle over the crowd, heavy and cold as the rain. This was an impossible situation. The water was still rising, steadily claiming more of the small red car. Time was running out, and then a shadow detached itself from the edge of the crowd, moving with a strange, determined limp towards the railing. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. As the last sliver of hope seemed to drain from the gathered onlookers, a three-legged dog, Willow, stood on the bridge's edge. Below her, the red car's roof, now a tiny island in a furious ocean, dipped lower. The driver, barely visible, slumped motionless against the wheel. Death felt minutes away. The helplessness was agonizing. Without a bark, without a glance back at the stunned faces, Willow launched herself into the black water. The splash was swallowed by the river's roar, but the sight of her small, struggling form cutting through the current brought gasps of disbelief. She was slow, yes, but her three legs worked with a fierce, unwavering determination, as if every ounce of her spirit was concentrated on this one impossible task. "She'll drown," someone cried, but Willow cut through that current like she'd trained her whole life for this exact night. Reaching the car, She scrambled onto its slick, sinking roof, her claws scraping for purchase. There, she began to bark, sharp, endless, deliberate. It wasn't a plea for help. It was a command, a desperate call to wake the dying. Through the fog glass, a pale hand slowly pressed against the inside of the window, a flicker of movement, a sign of life. He was awake. Relief, so profound it was almost painful, washed over the bridge. But the car was still sinking, and no rescue boat could get to them. The driver was conscious, but how would a fainting man and a three-legged dog escape a river that had beaten trained rescuers? Then, Willow did the unexpected. She leaped back into the water, not away from the car, but sideways, towards a cluster of dark shapes barely visible in the churning foam. Slowly, the onlookers squinted through the rain. A fallen tree, a tangled mass of branches, wedged between two large rocks. A precarious, hidden bridge, a path the current had hidden from them. A whisper of disbelief rippled through the onlookers as they finally understood what Willow was showing them, a way where there had been none. The understanding spread like wildfire through the crowd. A path, a desperate, almost suicidal path, but a path nonetheless. One of the younger, lighter firefighters, clipped to a safety line held by his colleagues, began to crawl along the treacherous, branch-strewn tree, following Willow's frantic barks. Each step was a gamble against the raging water, but the dog's unwavering guidance spurred him on. Minutes later, an eternity to those watching, he reached the car. With immense effort, he wrenched open the door and, just as the roof slipped irrevocably under the water, pulled the man from the sinking vehicle. A collective cheer erupted from the bridge, quickly dissolving into sobs of relief as the rescuer, with Willow swimming protectively beside him, guided the semi-conscious man back along the arboreal bridge to safety. On the muddy bank, surrounded by the flashing emergency lights, the exhausted man was laid down. Firefighters, their faces streaked with rain and relief, worked quickly, checking his vitals, wrapping him in blankets. And then came the part that made grown firefighters sit down in the mud and weep. As they wiped the mud and rain from the rescued man's face, a sudden, stunned silence fell. Someone recognized him. It was Michael, a kind-hearted volunteer from 4 winters ago. He was the one who, against the advice of everyone, had found a broken puppy on the roadside, a puppy everyone said to give up on, and carried her home, paid for the expensive surgery that saved 3 of her legs, nursed her back to health. He had rescued her once. Tonight, against every impossible odd, against all logic and reason, she had come to rescue him back. The 3-legged dog, Willow, had repaid her debt, not with gratitude, but with fierce, unconditional loyalty. No one on that bridge would ever forget the 3-legged dog who leaped into the black water, because she was the only one brave enough to understand exactly why. The story of Willow and Michael reminds us that the deepest connections are often forged in our most vulnerable moments, and that kindness, truly given, often finds its way back to us. If this tale of an extraordinary bond moved you, consider subscribing for more stories of quiet courage and incredible loyalty. And we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed an animal's extraordinary loyalty, or perhaps been the recipient of an unexpected act of kindness that came full circle?